symbols are all around us. Symbols have even gotten so good in some places that we don't even need the words anymore to understand the symbols. We know the symbols. They are so familiar to us. So we don't even need the words anymore. We just look at it and we know exactly what is happening. So take a look at some of these symbols and let's see, what do these symbols mean? So just go ahead and shout it out when you see the symbol. Okay? Patriotism, American flag, America, okay? Next one. Yeah, see, we don't even need the words anymore. It's so quickly become a thing. Next one. Yeah, you guys are so green. You're good. All right, next one. I like it. Good job. Facebook. Yeah. All right. Yeah, which is what? Yeah, okay. You math people. Next one? Power. There we go. All right, next one? Everybody got really happy. Next one? Female, good. Next one? Yeah, so you don't even need the letters on there. Okay, next one? Good. Not as Betty, but... Alright, next one? Yeah, hey! Okay, now, how about this one? Water. When we see a droplet, we think water. I think there's more to it than that. Let's dig deeper. And it depends on where we are. Let's say you saw this symbol pop up on the dashboard of your car. You might think, oh, I need to add coolant to my radiator. My car's going to overheat. Let's say you're walking around a museum or a library or some other public building and you see that symbol. You might think, there's a water fountain. I can get water there. Let's say you're a farmer. Rain. You get really happy with water. I mean, the last couple of years, it's been good, but before that, it was not really good. And so farmers wanted to see water. And that's when we saw everybody got super spiritual. Everybody started praying all the time for rain. You know, everybody was praying for rain. What about if you were reading through your Bible, you turned the page and you got to the next chapter, and all of a sudden you saw that symbol. You saw water. What would it mean? Water is all over the place in the Bible. It comes up hundreds and hundreds of times. These are just a few of those times, and there are many more. It's at the very beginning in creation in Genesis, it's at the very end in Revelation, and it's all the place in between. God deals with water, Jesus deals with water, people are baptized into water, people drink water, people fight over water. Water is a symbol of blessing and encouragement. Water is a symbol of all kinds of different things throughout the Bible. Water is everywhere in the Bible. And water is very much at the center of following God in a relationship with Jesus. And water is very much at the center of RiverCross Church. A group of us were meeting each Sunday evening. And there were 15 of us, that was parents and kids all together, and we were meeting each Sunday evening trying to figure out God's plans and God's direction for starting a church. We didn't all agree. We debated a lot. We argued a lot. We discussed a lot. We read a lot. We worshiped a lot. We did prayer walks a lot. We did all kinds of different things to try to figure out what were God's plans as far as a church goes. And one of the things we always did when we met together is we read a certain passage of Scripture and then we openly talked about it. One week, in the fall, on a Sunday evening, we opened up to Joshua chapter 3. and we started reading about water. For the Israelites, those people who were following God, it had been 40 years that they were wandering around that desert in that wilderness. It had been a long, long time. 4 decades that they had been wandering where they were going, wondering when they were going to arrive. And this was an epic time because some amazing things happened during that 40 years. They got the 10 Commandments from God. They saw miracles of God do incredible things. They were given a promise that one day they would be in the promised land. I mean, amazing things happened. And some tough things happened too. Like some of them decided that they wanted to leave God and worship other gods. Or some of them refused to be part of the group anymore. Or some just flat out disobeyed God. There were problems in the camp. But during those 40 years, God led them through. God led them through the tough times. God blessed them with amazing times. And all the while, they were hanging on to this promise that one day they would be in this place, this spot that God called the Promised Land. Full of beauty, full of abundance, full of peacefulness. It was like what a relationship with God is supposed to be like. That's what the land felt like. And the people held on to that promise that one day we're going to be there. And some days, they held on to the promise with great strength, and they were excited. And other days, they thought, that is never going to happen. So they went back and forth, both ways, for 40 years. 40 years! That's like from 1979 until today. That's most of my life. I mean, that's a long time that they held on to that promise. And after 40 years, it finally did happen. They came to the banks of the Jordan River. They saw across to where that land was, and they knew that's the land that God had always promised. They were living the promise that God had given them. But there was something that they faced. They faced water. Water was right in front of them. In order to live out that promise, they were going to get very wet. Because if this river is right in front of them, this Jordan River that is flooded, that is deep, that is far wider than it normally is, they're standing there thinking, how are we going to get the several 100,000 of us and our livestock and our kids and our belongings and all of our religious things like the Ark of the Covenant, these holy things we're carrying with us to worship God, how do we get all these things across the water? How do we make that happen? Because the water is in our way. So here's how Joshua tells the story. He says, listen to what the Lord your God says. Today you will know that the living God is among you. He will surely drive out, shall we read all this together out loud? No, I'm kidding. The Canaanites, Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, Girgashites, Amorites, and Jebusites ahead of you. Look, the Ark of the Covenant, which belongs to the Lord of the whole earth, will lead you across the Jordan River. Okay, pause there for a second. We need to talk about two things. First, what's the point of what's about to happen? What's the purpose of this whole episode? He gives it to us right up front. So that you know that the Lord your God is with you. That is the whole reason this whole thing happened. So that they knew, after 40 years of wandering, going back and forth, is God with us? Is God not with us? I don't really know. God is with you. So what's about to happen is meant to prove that. Now the second thing is what is to lead them across the Jordan River? What's leading them across? The ark. So in two ways that ark is leading them across the Jordan River. First, it's physically the first thing that goes. So everybody stands, the ark goes first, and then everybody follows. So physically, the ark has to go first. That's one way in which it leads them across. Second way is a bit different. The Ark of the Covenant was something that these people knew because they saw it being built, at least most of these people. It was built in their lifetimes. It was built by Moses in the middle of the desert, in the middle of the wilderness, and it was built as a small box. It was about 4 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet, so it was a box, and it was meant to be the most special box they had ever seen. All the people pooled together their resources, their fine fabrics, their gold, their precious jewels, anything that was valuable and important. God said, pool that together and create this beautiful ark. Now, what's the point of the ark? Why did the ark even exist? God said, I need a space in which to be with you. So you're going to build the most precious space you can, and God said, I'm going to live there. I'm going to be with you in this space. So wherever you go, your priests are going to carry this thing. Wherever you stay, it will stay. So this was the space in which God lived. So, back to the river. Why is the ark leading them across the river? Because who is leading them across the river? God is leading them across the river. Make no mistake, who is making this leading happen? This is God and God's work. And they saw it all over the place. Okay, let's keep going. Joshua says, now choose 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. The priests will carry the ark of the Lord of all the earth. As soon as their feet touch the water, the flow of water will be cut off upstream, and the river will stand up like a wall. So the people left their camp to cross the Jordan, and the priests who were carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. It was the harvest season, and the Jordan was overflowing its banks. But as soon as the feet of the priests who were carrying the ark touched the water at the river's edge, the water above that point began backing up a great distance away at a town called Adam, which is near Zarethan. And the water below that point flowed onto the Dead Sea until the riverbed was dry. Then all the people crossed over near the town of Jericho. Meanwhile, the priests who were carrying the Ark of the Lord's Covenant stood on dry ground in the middle of the riverbed as the people passed by. They waited there until the whole nation of Israel had crossed the Jordan on dry ground. Can you picture this? Okay, 12 priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant step into the water. And once they step into the river, once they get wet, the water will stop. Where does the water stop? Way upstream. This is not like the Exodus, where there's somehow this wall of water that they walk through. There is no aisle of water. The water stopped upstream in a town called Adam, 18 miles away. Now, think. If the water stopped 18 miles away and then the water kept flowing, how long did they have to wait until all the water flowed? I don't know, a long time. But imagine you're there and the priest touched the edge of the water and everybody's like, and then there's water, 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 water. It doesn't get smaller for, I don't know, hours. Finally, the waters flowed by and the dry ground was evident. Once the riverbed is dry, then everyone walks across. Now, that picture on the left, unfortunately, is not accurate because there's no water wall. But what's good about the picture is you see the droves of people. This is hundreds of thousands of people walking across. They held that ark for a very long time for those people to walk across. So what stayed in the river while the people walked across? The ark, the presence of God, stayed in that river while everyone walked across. It's interesting that this river was full of water, because water in the Bible is always a symbol for something. Water is never just there. Water is usually a symbol for something that happens in the Bible. So, what's water doing as they're standing there waiting for that water to wash by? What is the water symbolizing? I mean, literally, it's in the way. I mean, it's in front of them, keeping them out of the promised land. It is a problem, it's a barrier, it's the thing that's keeping them out of what God has promised for them that's on the other side. So water is what's separating them from the plans that God has ahead. So what happens? The presence of God steps into the water and removes the water. They know that the ark is the presence of God. They know that the purpose is so God can reveal himself and remind them that God is with them. It's the presence of God that removes the barrier, and they witness the power of God at the same time. It's the presence and the power of God that welcome them into the promised land and let them experience for the first time what God has promised for decades. And everybody cheers, and they applaud, and they're excited because God did this thing. But what did it take for all these people to experience that presence and that power of God? It took the priests stepping in. We don't often experience the presence and the power of God unless something happens, unless we do something, unless we take a step of faith, we often say, or unless circumstances happen, or unless we're pushed, or unless something happens. In some way or another, call it what you will, we have to step in. God told a group of us who were reading this whole story, trying to figure out what God was doing, leading us to start a church or not, God told us, you got to step in. We verified that with each other. We heard some sense of we're supposed to step in. And so for 6 more months, it was like the water was flowing down the river. For 6 more months, we talked and we wondered and we tried to figure it out, and we weren't totally clear. It was months until we all agreed, yes, God is calling us to start a church. God is leading us to step in. And we're experiencing the presence and the power of God in that decision. Just before we officially launched, we held a retreat. Just before the church started, we held a retreat, and many of you were at this retreat. It was a retreat over a weekend, and we played a game at that retreat. It was a game where we had to cross the river. So we divided up into teams of 6-ish, 8-ish people, and each team was given 3 short boards. Those boards by themselves were not long enough to cross the river. We could only take, as a group, 1 trip across the river. You couldn't send 1 person back to keep getting people. It didn't work that way. You had to take 1 trip to get your whole team on the boards across the river, and the boards were not long enough to get you across the river. So we spent a good half hour or more trying to strategize and figure out what to do to get across that river. How could we do it? And boy, did we have a whole lot of fun trying to figure out how to get across that river. In the end, we figured it out. Those of you who were there, you remember, how did we get across the river? What did we do? We joined together. The teams asked each other, can I use your boards? Let's work together. And when we put those boards together, it was a smooth path right across that river that everybody got to walk on. In order to keep stepping into the presence and the power of God as RiverCross Church, we cannot do this on our own. We have to do this together. RiverCross Church is not my church. It is not the core team's church. It is not the church of any one of us. It's not the church of any one person who's not here or who is here. RiverCross Church is us, together, stepping in to the presence and the power of Jesus Christ. Yeah. That is the only way this church will happen. Yeah. And as we step into the presence and the power of Jesus, we get to experience and participate in the plans that God has for us. God has plans for as long as God wants to exist. And our opportunity is to join together in those plans. I love backpacking, especially in high school. My best friend and I went backpacking during the summers up in the Sierra Nevadas whenever we could find the time to go. Our routine was just the two of us to find usually just 2 nights, to pack our way up, stay 2 nights, and come on back. And we had such a great time exploring different places. Usually what we would do is we would choose a new lake that we had not been to before. We would choose a lake and we would say, let's go for 2 nights. Well, one trip we were packing out, coming back home, and we took a day to do that hike back out. We stopped for lunch at a small little lake that we had never been to before. We stopped and we ate, and then he felt the water and he jumped in to the lake. And he swam around for a minute, and they said, come on, you gotta come in. Okay, so I felt the water, and I said, you've got to be kidding. This is like colder than cold. There was snow right there melting into the lake. I said, I am not getting in that water. And he swam around for another minute. He said, come on, you gotta get in. And I'll admit, my best friend was a total daredevil. I was adventurous, but not crazy. He was crazy. And so he said, come on, you gotta come in, you gotta come in. And I very quickly realized that if I did not get in that water, he was going to tell all our friends that Carl did not get in the water. So I got in the water. There are things that we will not do by ourselves. We will only do it together. And one of the opportunities we have is to experience the presence and the power of God, not just by myself, or not just by yourself, but together. May that presence and that power of God lead us to step in further to the plans that God has for us. Let's pray.